All right, I'm going to do a little podcast on the Civil War here. And what I found is that a way you can that helps you understand the Civil War is to understand the War of 1812. The War of 1812 was a sham. And so the War of 1812 was supposedly started by the United States because Britain was impressing U.S. sailors. U.S. sailors to serve in the Royal Navy in their war against France, or just be a part of the British Merchant Marine or whatever. And so, and obviously this was very unpopular in the United States, but what you won't learn in the government education camps is that it was also unpopular in Britain. And it was a policy that was advocated mainly by the Prime Minister at the time, Lord Percival. And this policy of impressment was driving Britain to war with the United States, and so obviously Britain didn't want to go to war with the United States while they were fighting France, and so this was rather unpopular. It was so unpopular, in fact, that Lord Percival got assassinated on May 11th, 1812. So he got assassinated on May 11th, 1812. Damn it. And the interesting thing about the date of his assassination was this is 38 days before the United States declared war on Britain. The United States declared war on Britain on June 18th, 1812. Now, 38 days. In 1812, it took on average about 21 days for a ship to cross the Atlantic, right? And so I'm thinking, well, it takes 21 days for a ship to cross the Atlantic. And how long would it take for news of Percival's death to reach the relevant British ports or port? And how long would it take for the information to travel from the American port that it arrived in to Congress? And I'm thinking 17 days. 21 minus 38 is 17 days for the information to travel overland. I'm thinking that seems about, I'm not an expert on this, but that seems about right. That seems, it seems as if Congress got word of Percival's death and declared war upon news of his assassination. And so but that's just one piece of evidence. So that doesn't prove guilt of Congress, but there's more pieces of evidence. Well, Lord Liverpool was the guy who succeeded Percival, and Lord Liverpool was willing to negotiate with the Americans and was willing to stop impressment of American sailors outright. He was just willing to stop it. No conditions, no nothing. He was just going to say, all right, I'm going to stop impressing your sailors. And so once he became prime minister, 38 days later, the United States declared war. In about the amount of time it would probably take for Congress to get word of Percival's death. Almost, it seems like a perfect fit, but that's circumstantial evidence. That's not proof of anything. However, we also know that the United States was greatly unprepared for the war with Britain. So much so that the United States declared war on Britain, and Britain, despite having to travel all the way across the Atlantic, and despite already being in a war with France, was able to prevent any major advances by the United States into Canada. That's how ineffectual the U.S. Army was at the outset of the war. Another piece of evidence was that at the outset of the war, the first move that the United States made was to capture Canada, of course. Same thing they did in the Revolutionary War. What's more is, so you have this thing. The United States was unprepared for war. They declared war at about the time that they would receive word of Percival's death. But even if you think all this is just one big old coincidence, even if you think all this was just a coincidence that that the United States declaring war on Britain despite not being prepared at all, that the United States' first move of the war, invading Canada, even if you believe like the 38 days, even if you think that all this is just a coincidence, then that's fine. That's fine. But if it all wasn't just a coincidence and the United States really was genuinely interested in just stopping the impressment of U.S. sailors, then they would have ended the war once they did receive news of Percival's assassination and Lord Liverpool's inauguration. If it really was about the impressment, then they would have stopped the war maybe, like a month later. Maybe in July they would have stopped the war. Say, whoa, you're not Percival. You're willing to negotiate with us. Okay, let's stop the war. No need to have people die and get their arms blown off, for something that we can just resolve in a conversation. And so that tells me, without much of a shadow of a doubt, that the War of 1812 was a contrived war by the United States, and an embarrassing failure. It was a they lied to get into the war, and they lost anyway. Okay, that's it just god awful, just a horrible episode of U.S. history. So that was the War of 1812, and the consequences of the War of 1812, and this is starting to get to stuff relevant to the Civil War, was that it was revealed that the United States industries, predominantly in the North, was not well prepared for war. They didn't produce a lot of the materials relevant to warfare, which, if you don't plan on going to war a whole lot, if you really are just interested in the rights of man and all that stuff, then what does it matter? What does it matter how much war material you can produce? If you really are just interested in upholding the Constitution and stuff, then you don't need all that war material, especially since you got the Atlantic Ocean protecting you from any major European invasion, and the only continental powers are, whatever British troops are stationed in Canada and like Mexico and like those South American countries. So really not a whole lot to worry about. But of course, it's not about that. It was never about that. It was about America. It was about American imperialism. And they saw that Britain was in a vulnerable position, and Lord Percival was providing an excuse to declare war. And so my theory is that they were trying to come up with a reason to build up the United States Army, but then Lord Percival's assassination forced America's hand and forced them to declare war prematurely, which is why the war went the way it did. But anyway, and so what this did is it revealed that Northern industry was not good for waging war, and also Northern industry during the war boomed, because now that the British blockade had shut off not only, of course, British markets, but also Central European markets, Central European industrial centers, what it did is it acted as protection for American industries and gave American industries a monopoly on the war production. And so, American industries boomed during the war. And so not only did the war reveal the lack of a war-making ability of U.S. industries, but it also, not only did it give them a little bit of a stick, but it gave them a little bit of a carrot and go, we can kind of boom our industries if we protect it. If we be a little bit protectionist, we can kind of, we can grow our industries. And that was one of the reasons for the tariffs. Another reason used for the imposition of tariffs was that the war caused a massive debt, and so they used those were the two excuses that Congress used to levy the tariffs. And so they levied tariffs, and the tariffs predominantly or mainly hurt the South and helped the North, obviously. Because the northern industries were being protected at the cost of higher European goods. The problem also was that the southern states were dependent on European export markets. They were dependent on European countries buying their cotton. And the thing is that when the United States puts in place